So good afternoon, everybody. So we are on the afternoon session for this fourth day of our 2 week FTP series 2. So here comes Dr. Sudhagar, who was also on the first day in the afternoon session. So he is going to continue his part now. So with a short intro, I'll hand over the session to him. So we'll move to the short intro now. Sudhagar has completed his UG in the year 2006 and his postgraduate studies in the year 2008. And later, he joined with Vernalis Systems Private Limited as software associate and has spent 3 years in various positions, starting from junior associate to the team lead. Due to his passionate with teaching, learning practice, he moved to Kamaraj College of Engineering and Technology as an assistant professor in the year 2011. He also bagged Best Faculty Award, named Inspire Distinguished Facilitator Award in the years 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017 from Infosys Limited. That has been his great landmark. He also published 4 journal papers and 6 conference articles with H10 index. At present, he is working as a senior scientific officer at Advanced Technology Development Center, Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. He is also an active research scholar in the Speech Processing Research Group. He has completed different certification programs in big data analytics and cloud computing. His research area of interest includes unsupervised pattern discovery in speech signals, text to speech systems for low resource languages, artificial intelligence, deep neural networks, and data analytics. So, with this short introduction, I'm handing over this platform to Dr. Sudhakar so that he can enlighten the participants. Now, you can take over the session, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. It's a long introduction, actually. Okay, fine. Thanks a lot. I think, let me brush up some of the concepts that we have seen on day one afternoon session. Before that, let me present my presentation. I have two presentations. One is this. I hope so. This is. Yeah, I think participant, the presentation is visible to all of you, I guess. Now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, I mean, today, as I told in the last discussion, like it will be a, hands-on and theoretical session where we will be focusing on some of the machine learning concept, how that machine learning concept evolve, and what are the strategies that we are going to use in the machine learning concept. Before going to that, I think in the day one session, you might have gone through various articles with respect to the machine learning, where I have also given some of the fundamentals of the concepts that mostly required for the machine learning, starting from the need for the machine learning and then how that machine learning works in general and other stuffs. We have also introduced some of the data engineering concepts, like once you select some data, how the data should be, like what are the key points you have to consider while cleaning up the data, and how you are going to handle data if you don't have values, and how we are going to substitute the data, all those steps. So I think you may have some good exposure over the data. Now, today we mostly focus on how we are going to utilize the data for the machine learning concepts. So before going to the concepts, I'd like to ensure that the environment which we are going to use is having sufficient packages so that we can go for a machine learning. Now, that's the reason I brought you the terminal as well now, so that you can also see the terminal window. Now, as I told, like we will be using the virtual environment with respect to Python. So we have seen some of the virtual environment, where right now I'm using my virtual environment as ZS. And let's see what are the packages that are installed. so that you will have a clear idea about the packages that I'm going to use on today's session and the purpose of the package as well. So when you see some of the packages that comes built in when you are installing a virtual environment, so no need to worry about it. But as I mentioned, few packages like the NumPy package, where most of the array-based processing will be, or matrix processing will be helpful through the NumPy package. So this is very, very important when we are going for a machine learning, because all our data is represented in terms of arrays, and then these arrays are given as input to the other package. So if we have a good exposure on the array, how to handle the array, or in terms of matrix, then this NumPy has a very good support on handling the arrays. Like when you want to transpose the array, how can you transpose? When you want to just look down a columns of a particular array, how can you slice the columns? Or if you would like to slice the rows, how can you do that? So all these things can be supported through NumPy. So that's one of the package. Then the next package is Pandas. This package we have come across, but I would like to highlight the purpose and the reason why these packages are useful. If you look at the Pandas, the predominantly the usage is the data IO, like the files data IO in the sense file read and then file write. So most of our challenge comes from the data IO. That's what I would like to highlight today, because being audience I'm keep on just running few commands and then executing the task and then show you this is how it is work. But when you look at actually, if you go to home and then try out these things, the first and the foremost challenge will happen. Or I could not say it's a challenge for a well-versed user. It could be a easy part for a new user. It could be a task where how to load the data from your corpus or from your file to a Python environment. So for that, I am suggesting Pandas. Pandas has a good package, like good support or good variability on reading multiple formats. Like you can read a CSV file, you can read a tab delimited file, you can read Excel file, you can read other files as well, like even a MATLAB files or DAT files, data files. So the reason is why I would like to highlight is if you take an engineering application, especially different engineering application uses different sort of file format. So most of the file formats are supported through Pandas. If you take a plain or vanilla Python flavors, then you will have only a few format, or I could say you have to break your stuffs in such a way that you have to directly read from the raw file and then you have to extract the data. Instead, Pandas help us to do the job easy, so that with one line of command we can accomplish the task. So this is the second package I would like to highlight. And the third package which I would like to highlight for machine learning task is the package called scikit-learn. Actually, I would like to introduce another package, but I feel that the package is little little heavy if I start to introduce for the new audience. Instead, if audience who are very good at Python, then that package can be useful. The package is called Keras. But before Keras, if we go to scikit-learn, or sometimes the people call it as a sklearn, this package contains a complete machine learning algorithms, where you can just directly use the machine learning algorithms to run your program. So this is another package. And the SciPy is another good package for scientific processing. Like let's say you need to read some sine waves, you need to read some other sort of waves. So with respect to signals, if you like to work on this, SciPy is good support for that. Then instead of Seaborn actually I have used for other projects, but instead of Seaborn, if you install Matplotlib, that is sufficient for data visualization purpose. So these are some of the packages that are mandatory for our session on today, so that we can we can go through the session without any hurdles. So if you don't have, no problem, like I'll be walk through the code so that you can understand the code and then see how the code is executing. Beyond that, then if you have any doubts or the other clarification, then we will reserve some time, especially let's say 15 minutes time for the discussion, so that whatever the doubts you had in the day one as well as on today's session, we will clarify, and then we can go back to home with satisfaction, saying that like, okay, some machine learning, we have gone through the concept. So with that as a objective, let me start the session. Today's session, I'll be only focusing on machine learning. So before going to the machine learning or machine learning algorithms, so what is typically a learning, then what is will go for a machine learning. So these two concepts we have to be very clear. What is learning? Let's discuss about a minute about concept of learning. So when do we say a learning? So the learning, the word itself has different meanings with respect to artificial intelligence. If you take artificial intelligence, when do you say a machine is learning? If it could able to take a decision where the human can take a similar decision on the same situation, then we could say a machine is learning. So that means many of the learning tasks related to human beings capability on handling a particular situation at a particular task. So that's the thing. So when we come to machine learning, so when a machine can learn, so yeah, the machine can learn in the sense here with respect to machine learning concept. Let's say uh, there are scenario, as I said, we are shifting from the rule based approach to a data driven approach. So if you look at the data driven approach, as the size of the data is growing day by day higher, so what to do with the data, how to take a decision over the data, so that becoming a trivial part of today's life. So now we are depending on the machine so that it can see large number of data and get some insights in the data, which we call it as a learning or machine learning. Because if the system try to find some relationship in the data with respect to the concepts, then we can say, okay, a machine is capable of learning the task. Then what is the scenario in which the machine is capable of learning? Here I have an example, but before going to that example, let me give an overview so that we can try to visualize like what is there. Let's say we have some task, and let's say in other word, let's say we have some data point and we have some output. In simple terms, let's say we have some power usage which happened. I mean, since most of you are from electrical engineering, I'm giving an example of power. So let's say we have some power usage which happening on day by day, maybe in an area or in a city or maybe in a zone. And then we also have the output, whether if a power usage shoots to a particular level, then we also have other data that whether is there a power cut in the area, or is there a power continuity in the area. Let's say if there is a power cut, we mention it as a 1. If there is no power cut, we mention it as a 0. So we have two data. Like one is the amount of power that is utilized in a particular area. On the other side, we have whether the power cut occurred or the power cut not occurred. So let's say this particular data is getting populated day by day, and we have accumulated some 10 years of data over it. Now, can we do something over it? Because like if you take 10 years of data, typically let's assume that every day a record is getting populated. So the amount of record you have is huge. Now with that record, is it possible to derive some hypothesis, in the sense that, let's say if I get some amount of data in my hand, then I can able to determine whether the power cut occur or the power cut will not occur. So some sort of hypothesis. So this is the scenario which we need machines to take a decision. Now how that machines can take a decision? It cannot take a decision just like that. So what the machines can do typically, the machines try to understand the relationship between the input and the output, and then it tried to create a relationship mathematically. Very simple logic, nothing. So if you find any mathematical relationship between the input and output, and the machine tried to predict that mathematics relation, or it is trying to derive the mathematical relation in such a way that in the future case, if you pass the input, the machine itself able to it has a capability to predict the output. This concept we are calling it as a machine learning. So you take any example, this is how the machine learning comes into picture. Now let's go back to the concept of machine learning, and what are the varieties of machine learning we do have, and what are the variability in terms of machine learning. There are plenty of variability that will be coined by each scientist on different perspectives. So I would like to highlight all the buzzwords so that whenever you hear the buzzword, then you will have a confidence that okay, this buzzword is for this particular purpose. So in general, you might have heard these categories. In general, machine learning with respect to human supervision, in the sense that whether you are passing you are passing a output and the input to a machine to predict the future output. So that is with respect to the data where you are having a class labels that is exist already in your hand, and you are allowing the machine to do. So this we call it as a supervised learning. So I know the output and I have some input, so that I'll allow the machine to learn the relationship, and then based on the relationship, I will ask the machine to predict the future input. So this type of things we call it as a supervised learning. So based on the human supervision, whether you are asking the machine to use the supervision, or you are completely ask the machine to go for unsupervised. So based on that, we have four classes of machine learning strategies. One is the supervised learning, as I said. So supervised learning, you need a data as well as you need a output or outcomes. Now the task for the machine is to learn the relationship between the data and the outcome, so that in the future, if a new data comes, it try to predict the outcome. That's all. So let's say the input data, we call it as a X, and the predict, the outcome we say Y. Then there is a function that try to maps the input X to Y. That's all. So that machine learning task is to find the function or the relation, we can call it as. So that task we call it as supervised learning. Unsupervised learning is totally different. So unsupervised learning do not have any outcome. It has only the data. Now the task is, what is the relationship within the data, or I could say how the data is spread over the space. Let's say I have two different variables, how the data is spread over the space, and how I can group the data into some units so that the decision can be taken. A classical example I could say is, let's say in the college, if you take a college, and then if you start to create a plot in such a way that you take the students grade. Okay, so the students may take any grade starting from S grade, I guess, Anna University system, the top grade. So maybe the top grade, you take anything like let's say S grade is the top, and then A, B, C, D, maybe E, till E. So something like that. You have a grade, and you try to put the students on different bins with respect to their grades. So this is some sort of unsupervised learning, because after you placing the bin, you will come to know different insights, like with the entire population, how many number of students belong to a particular grade. So this will give different insights towards the data. Those sort of learning we can go for unsupervised fashion, because it does not have any outcome. It has some data. We are trying to learn from the data. So that sort of concept comes as a unsupervised learning. Most probably the clustering based problems focus on the unsupervised learning concepts. Coming to a semi-supervised learning, this semi-supervised learning is one of the interesting concepts where you have a large amount of data, but you have some manpower, so that you created the relation. I mean, you start to predict the input and the output for a few number of sample. Let's say you have some million of record. From the millions of record, you could able to get the output for some thousand records, and remaining records you have to predict from the learnings. So now what we will do, so for a portion of record, we start to predict using a supervised way where we already have a data labels in our hand. So for the other remaining records, we use the same learning strategy to predict the outcome. So this sort of like some portion uses a supervised concept to know the input relationship, and after that we are using the same thing to predict the remaining information. So this kind of concept we come into semi-supervised learning. So we have some records which are already labeled and our remaining records are unlabeled. The fourth interesting concept is reinforcement learning, and this is quite very interesting nowadays, becoming a popular in the game theory or in many concepts in the game field, in many area where you don't have any information at the beginning. So a good example is, let's say you can take a chessboard. So you assume that you are trying to play with the computer. How the computer could be able to make a move in such a way that whenever you make a move, the computer also creates a counter move towards that. Now this is happening through reinforcement learning. That means, so at the first time, or at the initial stage, the computer do not have any information about the player. So once you started to play with the computer starts to learn during the real run itself. So when you make a move, the computer starts to know for this particular move, what are the coins that get affected, so that what should be the counter move. So the computer starts to apply its searching strategy over the space and then find the best path so that it starts to make a move. Then again you will make a further move. Again the computer starts to predict. So all this learning will happen during the time. It will not happen with respect to some input output data points where nothing will be there in the initial stage, but during online, a classical example could be one way of thing is it's online learning as well. Okay, so all these four categories comes with respect to the supervision. And on the other way, so like how do you learn from the samples? So with respect to that, we have two more classes. I mean, not two more classes. These classes also will be a part of the previous thing, but with respect to different dimension. The batch learning, where the deep neural networks follows this approach. The batch learning, instead of because the data samples are too high, so with the too high samples, we cannot allow the program to see all the samples. So instead, we will allow the program to see a batch of samples. Let's say if I have 1 lakh record, instead of seeing 1 lakh record at a time, what I'll do, I'll break the, I'll make the logic in such a way that you first run a batch of 1,000, and then you again run a batch of next is 1,000. Likewise, you keep on run a batch of 1,000 for 100 times to learn the thing. So this kind of learning with respect to sample, we call it as a batch learning. And coming to online learning, as I said, reinforcement learning is a kind of online learning where you will try to learn the concept during the execution of the or during the occurrence of the event. Okay, before that you will not have any information. So even what data the learner going to use, nothing will be there. So all the learning will happen online. So that sort of learning will be online learning. A classical example is like game world, where when you try to play a game with the computer also starts to learn and then uses the counter moves to, it's try to beat the humans against that. So this is one way of learning. On the other way, like a generalization of data samples. Earlier, the number of samples here the generalization of data samples. This is more, this is more interesting, where by default we will use instance-based learning. Instance-based learning is the example I told in the first, like we will have a samples in our hand. From these samples, we try to learn the concepts. So that we call as instance-based learning. Again, instance-based learning could be a supervised learning or unsupervised learning, because both will have a data samples with us, and with that data samples we try to learn. Maybe if we have output labels, we can go for a supervised. If we don't have output labels, we can go for unsupervised list. Okay, so now another interesting concept is a model based learning, where this is becoming a popular day by day. Again, I have to, I mean, clear you on what is model based learning, so that you know these many characteristics or these many varieties of learning exist in the machine learning approach. If you take a model based learning, let's say you would like to predict, okay, let's assume that you would like to predict the students, maybe again I'll come into the same students example, where where we can visualize very easily. Let's say you try to predict the students grade with respect to their previous marks they have scored, maybe in class test or the unit test which you used to conduct. So with that marks, let's say you try to predict the students marks, but unfortunately you don't have any records with you. So that's the crucial thing. Now if you don't have any records, obviously we cannot go for this learning, because all the learning rely on the data samples we have in hand. Now instead of that, what you are doing is, already such type of learning happened to some other college, where you are going to get the model of the college, and then you are going to apply how far the model is able to fit to your college. So this is another interesting fact which is happening in many domains, even in signal domains and many domains. Okay, this model based learning is very interesting. Say as I told, like some other college already developed some approaches to predict the students outcome. What you are going to do is, you are not going to get the data. Instead, you are going to get the model. As I told, a model has a relationship between the input and the output, and you know that the input is similar category in which the other college has used, and the outcome also same. So it is clearly matches to your scenario, but unfortunately you don't have data to create the model. Instead, you are trying to get the model from somebody else, and then you try to apply your data samples to that model to see the predicted outcome. So this is called a model based learning, or many scientists used to call this as a transfer learning. That means you are trying to transfer learning happen from one sample set to another sample set. So that we call it as a transfer learning, and many engineering application uses this learning, because some engineering applications may not have huge amount of data, where some other application may have a data. Then why don't we use the transfer learning of the application which had data to the other application, so that the problem can be solved. Somewhere I think I could be able to hear the noise. Maybe yeah. I hope now. Now is that better? Others? Once again. Okay. Yeah. Now is that my screen is visible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I can go ahead. Yeah. Okay, so these are the varieties of learning. So don't worry about because different during the different time, different words or different approaches will be coined. So whatever may be, at least you can come to conclusion that okay, this is a part of a particular learning. Now coming to the detailed explanation, if you take a supervised learning, so supervised learning, the objective is it's tried to create a mapping from the input data samples to the output. So here you need both. Without that, you cannot go for a supervised learning. You need a data as well as you need a outputs. Typically, in general, we the data inputs are data, we call it as a X, and the output we call it as a Y. So you need both, and the task is to find the relationship between X and Y. So why we are finding the relationship between X and Y, and in the future, if a new sample, let's say X dash, that comes, then we can predict the output Y dash. And now if you take supervised learning, again you will go through various performance metrics, like let's say I have data samples, and then how far the learning was happened. So for that, again you need different hypothesis, like whenever you started to build the samples, you will reserve some samples for the testing, and you release the other samples for training. So during the training, the system learns the relationship, and once it's learned the relationship, then you will give the testing data. So sometimes, like depends upon the amount of data size. So typically the 70-30 ratio will be followed. If we have let's say 1000 records, 700 records will be allocated for training, and 300 records will be reserved for testing. And this 300 records, once your systems learns from the 700 records, you start to test the 300 records, so that you can know how efficiently your system can does that task. Coming to the unsupervised learning, as I said, it's trying to extract some meaningful information from the corpus or from the data you are having. So yeah, by default, like classical unsupervised learning is clustering. So clustering, you try to cluster the data point into a few categories, so that you will come to know, okay, what are the upper and lower limit for this cluster, so that I can make a class label for that. So that comes under unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning, we don't have any outcomes, only the clusters that discuss about the relationship among the data points. And coming to a semi-supervised learning, as I told, you will have small amount of data that is already labeled. So labeled and annotated. So you are going to use that small amount of data to predict the remaining data. So it's a kind of supervised and unsupervised. So we call it as a semi-supervised learning. Coming to the reinforcement learning, reinforcement learning do not have data in the beginning. So what it will go for online learning, where there will be an environment. From the environment, it starts to learn how the environment reacts to a particular incidents, or to a particular move. If we take the game, chess game, and then based on that, it starts to uh, make a further learning, and then further moves will be carried out towards the learning. And if the system was well written, then obviously, like the artificial intelligence start to beat human being. But there are many cases where, like again, you could know, like how Vishwanath Anand, how many times Vishwanath Anand has make a winning move against the computer itself. And there are that's what actually the artificial intelligence goes to a particular level. And definitely it will make it will create a good tough choice for the human being. So that sort of learning, we call it as a reinforcement. And the other learning we already discussed. And these learnings, 8 major categories of learnings, will be used on different cases and different scenarios, so that if you know what is this, then it is easy for you to pitch up the problem. Now, coming to the core concept of what is machine learning. So as I said, we have some input. This input, we call it as X, and this input could be a one data sample or a number of data samples, like one student mark, or let's say multiple subject marks, whatever you take. And the output is results, that we call it as a Y. So the objective of the model, whatever we are saying, model in the machine learning, what is the objective is to find the relationship between X and Y. That's it. So that's the hypothesis here. So if the model learns correctly, then what does it mean is, like it exactly finds the relationship between X and Y, so that on any samples it produces the results as it is, I mean, correctly. If that is the case, then we can say 100% our model is accuracy. Okay, and it most of the time it will not happen for 100% because it is a machine learning, and we also there are plenty of factors that determines the model's outcome. I will tell why what are the factors that determines the model outcome, so that this input will be very useful when you are discussing with the deep learning concept. But anyway, deep learning we are not going to touch now, but this creates a good fundamentals for the deep learning. Let's say I have some data samples, but I have the outcome as well, but I do not know how many data samples clearly represents the outcome. Let's say, as we told, right, like during the training time, we will allocate some amount of data samples for training. Let's say we'll take same 1,000 samples. I'm allocating 800 samples for training. This 800 samples have different relationship between x and y, correct? So the task is to find the generalized relationship between x and y, so that for the particular input x, what is the output y. What happens to the machine? Initially what the machine does is the machines try to predict some value y, we call it as a y dash, then the machine compare with the actual value y. So now if y dash is equal to y, what we can assume is whatever the value the machine predicted is correct. So the machine hypothesis is correct. But at the first stage itself, it may happen, or many times it will not happen. So what happens? There is a difference between y and the y dash. That means the actual output and the predicted output. Now it find the distance between y and y dash. Again, we have different distance metrics like Euclidean distance, cosine distance, and there are plenty of distance metrics. It tried to find the dissimilarities among these two components, and it see, okay, this is the distance. Then again, for the next input, let's say now we have taken x1 at the first time, and for the next input it take x2, and then it tried to modify in such a way that it reduces the distance, so that the objective is it brings the y and y dash as close as possible. Because if it brings y and y dash as close as possible, then we have achieved the task. That means y dash at one particular time y dash is equal to y, so that is what we are expecting. So once it is done, then the model might have learned the parameters correctly. So this is the overall hypothesis of how machine learning is going to work. Now, what are the scenario happen is, if my data samples is not distributed properly. So again, the statistics come into play. Let's say it is biased towards some samples. Let's say the first 800 samples, as we discussed, do not have some relationship that exists in the next 200 samples. What happens? This is a kind of bias. So if any bias that introduced during the input, then again, obviously, see, it's a machine. It try to learn the machine. Whatever input we are passing, that relationship it learns, and then it try to predict the outcome. So if any bias is there, again, the same bias will be learned by the model and then predict. And during the testing, when you pass new samples in which the model has not at all seen those samples, then obviously it fail in that case. Then the accuracy of the model is to come down. So whatever the input sample space we are selecting, it should be unbiased and it is equally distributed, so that it should be able to predict the real-time scenario. If you have such data sample, then you are done. Almost your machine learning could be able to does the job more than 90% accuracy, I could say. I mean, for an sample example, I'm saying. So that's the actual core concept of how this machine learns. So it tried to find the relationship, how you give the number of samples and how your samples are distributed over the sample space evenly. Then with respect to that distribution, it starts to learn. So that's the fundamental. Okay, now we'll come to some example. Okay, how this machine starts to learn. Let's say a person, some person. So he want to know whether the happiness is whether is there any relationship between the income and the happiness. So what he does is he has taken some people, and he start to interrogate the people, and then collected some data, let's say 494 samples that he has collected. This data is available. You can go income and the happiness data set. You can download it. Even you can work out. So what does it has? It has a people income and the happiness, and the happiness was recorded in the scale 1 to 10. If it is 10, the people are much happy, and if it is 1, the people are unhappy. So now the thing is that first of all, there are two hypotheses you would like to clarify. Is there any relationship between the income and the happiness? First, if so, then is it possible to predict, okay, given an income, what could be the happiness a person can earn in a particular country? Okay, so I don't know whether how far this scenario suits to Indian examples, but anyway, we will not focus the income now. Now here is the plot. So what the person does is he started to plot the samples, like 494 samples. The x-axis that discuss about the income, and in terms of $10,000 in the X scale. So the maximum is 12 cross $10,000. I mean, not beyond that. Okay, we have some 13, even it goes till 14. And on the y-axis, we have a happiness from 0 to 10 scale. So and he started to plot. And by looking, don't look at the, I mean, red line. Instead, you just look at the plot. So if you look at just the data plots, if you look at it, the dots that are plotted, we could see some relationship, right? Like if you see the income is going high on the right side, obviously the happiness also getting moving up on the y-axis. So there is a relationship, but the challenge is from a human being, by with the plot we could say, okay, there is a relationship exist, and then we could say the income is related to the happiness. But how far? Like if given a income of, let's say, $80,000, what could be the happiness he'll get? Now we don't have any point to argue. So for that we can go for a machine learning, finding the relationship mathematically. So this is a simple regression relationship where I have a x and I have a y. So a classical example is y equal to mx plus c, where I try to find the line between the x and y, and using a slope m, so that I could get a line. If I plot the line, then I can easily get like what is the relationship between this x and y, and then I can also get the point. So if I want to know what could be the particular happiness given a particular income, then I can create an intercept of the income at the particular point, and then I can also create a similar projection over the y-axis to see the happiness scale. So now this is quite interesting, right? Like how we can find that, because the number of samples is too high. If we have some 10 samples, 15 samples, by working out in hand, we can able to easily do. So for that, we are going for a regression model. So if you apply a regression model, here you will get, so I'm using a linear regression, and this is the equation. So y is equal to 0.20 plus 0.71 star x plus or minus 0.018, and this is a constant, where constant will get vary sometime. But you see, this is how we are trying to find the relationship between x and y, so that when the future, if a new x comes, it is possible to predict the value of y. So it's a simple example how this linear regression works with respect to the machine learning concept. And if you like to know much information, you can go through this website, which has data samples, and then using that data samples, you can try yourself with the machine learning environment you have to see that whether are you getting the similar equation which I am having in my hand, and then you can appreciate how far the machine learning could be able to figure out the insights of the data. So coming to this, okay, we have a model, and then how far the model is good, how far the model is better, that is very, very important. like what is the accuracy of the model and what is the confidence of the model. So these two things plays a major role when you're dealing with the machine learning. Okay, let's say the accuracy says with respect to the data points you are having, and the confidence says with respect to the testing samples you are passing to the machine learning. Now let's say my machine learning model or my algorithm could be able to predict 98% accurately with the result with the confidence of 96%. So that's important. This, how can we get the confidence this, and how can we get the performance metrics, evaluation metrics? So a typical evaluation metric, I mean, being a mathematics with the what the typical evaluation metric is, like we will use distance metrics or the other metrics. Like if we have the samples in the continuous domain, we will use distance metrics. If it is in the discrete domain, of course we will go with the mean square error or mean absolute error, or even the R squared error. So if you know, like you have output and then you have a predicted output, so either you can use R squared error or mean square error or mean absolute error to see how much difference between the actual output and the predicted output. Then if you take a mean of all the cases, then you, if you take a square of that, you'll get the mean square error. And even you can also apply mean average error. Typically in traditional we'll go for mean square error in the machine learning, but there are cases where we will also focus on the mean absolute error. So this is, I would like to highlight, like what are the different types of errors. Instead we will not go in detail about each error, when do we use and how do we use, so that this error gives us the in the other way, this error gives us the metrics to determine the model's performance. So we know what is the model. Model is having a relationship between the input data and the outcome, and we also gone through like how much, what is the quality of the model, and the quality of the model I could able to see in terms of testing data. So that is the reason many machine learning algorithms, when you start to run, they will ask the training data and the testing data. And as I said, like 70-30 model we will go, or 80-20 model will go for the training and the testing data distribution. And the most important point I would like to highlight when you're kickstart with the machine learning is, and many places this will happen, like say the some data samples will be I mean some samples are impure. So due to various cases, like maybe the environmental noise or the other noise will happen, and these impure samples may occur in a specific range. So if that is the case, and you cannot use that specific range of samples for validating your model, instead I suggest is, instead if you don't know like your data sample is having error or not error, instead you have a shuffled data, and then you pass the shuffled data to your model for a multiple amount of times, and then see that let's say for five numbers of trials, and for each trial you shuffle the data with the 70-30 probable, 70-30 ratio, and then for that that's a, we call it as a k-fold matrix. 5 times I am trying to fold the data, and in the 5-fold, all each fold I'll use 70-30 shuffled data to see the testing. Then I will take an average of my model's confidence, so that this way you can guarantee say this is the accuracy of the model. I mean in general on all cases. Okay, so this is about the overview of like uh, excuse me, like how the machine learning works, and what are the points we have to be careful while discussing about the machine learning. Especially on today's task, we will be focusing on three major problems. One is the classification problem, another one is the clustering problem, another one is the regression problem. Instead of going in detail and then discuss about what are the categories of classification problem, how this classification problems and the other things goes, instead of going that, what I tried is, so we'll go for the one particular classification problem, and then we'll take our the data samples which we have seen on Monday. With that data sample, we see how far we can able to apply the classification problem over the data sample to find the insights. So that could be the task. Similarly, clustering as well as regression problem. So if you take a classification problem, typically classification, the name itself suggests that you try to classify the data points to some classes. Let's say whether the power cut comes or power cut will not come according to a particular power consumption, then we could say it's a binary class classification problem, because my outcome is only two classes, whether is there a power cut or is there no power cut. So it's a two class. And if you have multiple classes, let's say a classical example is student's grade. If you take a student's grade, students marks can be fall on different grades: S grade, A grade, B grade, C grade, the other grades in which the system supports. So here this comes with the multi-class classification problem. And there is another problem that gives very good insights of the classification is multi-label classification, where many of them will not emphasize that. When you take multi-label classification problem, this is a multi-class, multi-label classification problem. I could say, I don't want to confuse in the beginning, sir. That's the reason I separately pointed out like multi-label classification problem. Let's say I am trying to find a particular outcome of the incident, and this outcome may not directly match with the one single class. Instead, a portion is matching with the class A, and the portion is matching with class B, and the portion is matching with the class C. So in this case, what I cannot give one label to the class. Instead, I have to give multiple labels, so that these multiple labels give me different insight. Let's say I'll give you a good thing is, let's say we are trying to find the students into three different class. One is weak learner, another one is good learner, and the another one is a mediocre learner through their marks. Okay. But the system is instead of asking our system to give a one single class, we are going to give multiple labels, so that the system going to give us output 70% of this student's marks fall under good learner, and maybe 10% of this student's marks says that the student is a weak learner, and the remaining 20% of the marks says that the student is the mediocre learner. Then with these labels, we will further go for a classification to classify whether the student is a mediocre learner or the good learner. Okay, this sort of problem is also very useful on various analysis. So I have mentioned that as a multi-label classification. So we have three sort of classification problem: binary classification, multi-class classification, and multi-label classification. Okay, so right. Okay, up to now, is that okay? Fine. Am I going in a right phase? So is that fine? Anybody from audience, can you unmute and speak?
Yes, sir. Everything is fine, sir. You can go ahead, sir.
Okay, fine. Next, I'll be move on to the regression problem. As I said, regression problem typically try to find the relationship between the input and the output. And this relationship is not like a classification relationship. Instead, it's trying to find the relationship in a continuous domain than the discrete domain. So that's the reason we are saying this is a regression problem. And again, in the regression category, we have different regressions, like simple linear regression, where there are only two variables, the input variable X and the output variable Y. Where the multiple linear regression, instead of X, we will have many variables, let's say X1, X2, X3, and then we are trying to find the relationship Y. And As I said, the regression problem always the outcome is in a continuous domain. I mean, not a discrete. The outcome is not a discrete. If the outcome is continuous, then we can go for a regression problem. And the nonlinear regression, actually, this is another interesting category where instead of using a one single regression to find the hypothesis, we will use multiple regression because one single regression doesn't fit into this problem. Instead of taking one single regression, we may use multiple regression to fit into the hypothesis to predict the outcome variable y. So this we call it as a non-linear regression. It's a multiple. You need different linear equations to see not a single equation. You need a multiple different linear equation to match the outcome. So that's with respect to the regression. And coming to the clustering problems, yeah, this I think almost all of you have clear idea about the clustering. So you may have many number of samples in the clustering. So because that's once machine learning starts, the easiest problem you will have is the k-means clustering and the hierarchical clustering and the other stuff. But coming to the clustering classes, the first class is partition based clustering, where you have again many clustering cases. Like typically the partition based clustering try to partition the data samples into k partition. In this case, we will come into k-means clustering. So it tried to partition the data samples into a number of partition based on the some logic. Let's say if you take k-means clustering, it tried to create the centroid and then tried to compare each data point towards the centroid, and then it tried to move the centroids during the multiple runs so that the centroids become converged in the sense the centroid becomes stable for a number of trials, so that we'll keep that centroid as a fixed one in the k-means clustering. And coming to the hierarchical clustering works on different way. Instead of taking the data points and then taking the center, we try to group the data in terms of different stages, different subtrees. So the Dentagon is a classical example for the hierarchical clustering, and the density based clustering that becomes nowadays very key. Because if you take a k-means clustering and the other clustering, these clusterings going to work on the distance metrics. So typically these distance metrics are derived from the Euclidean space, and almost all the data samples will not have or will not map into a Euclidean space. If your data samples are derived from some other space, then obviously this clustering going to fail. So for that, again, the classical clustering would be a density based clustering, where depends upon the actual data density where it is spread over the space, and that density is considered and the clustering was done towards that density. So these are some of the techniques that exist. I mean, not the techniques, some of the categories of techniques that exist over different problem. So I'm just projecting. Now let's focus on three major problems in our case. So what we are going to do is we will see regression problem in our case, where we will try to use a linear regression to work on the data set, that is the power consumption data set that happened in the Paris over 4 years of duration. How we can use linear regression to predict some outcomes. So that's one of the exercise which I am going to solve. Further, we will work on some clustering approach to see is it possible to find any information through this unsupervised fashion in the clustering, and we will also go through the multiple linear regression. And in this case, I'm going to give you a different approach. Like you may heard or you may not heard the AdaBoost algorithm, where AdaBoost algorithm is going to learn a boosting approach, and we'll see how the AdaBoost works and the other things when we are learning an example. So now we'll go for a linear regression, and this is actually very simple model. The basic, or I could say the introductory model that was introduced during the machine learning concepts. Even this exists from the statistics and the mathematics at many places. So we will learn all those things during our school days itself. So what it says is that y equal to mx plus c. So I try to predict the relationship between y and x, where x is our set of input values and y is the outcomes of that value. And it has another two components where in our case it is b1. So our equation is y is equal to b1x plus b0. So instead of y equal to mx plus c, we will say b1x plus b0. And b1 is the factor in which it is multiplied with the x. So we are finding the factor, and along the factor, what is the constant we are having. So in traditionally the c is the constant, here b0 is the constant. So we are trying to find the relationship. Now let's try to work out how this linear regression is going to helpful in our case. So now let's move on to the practical session, where I have here a few things. Okay, so now, okay, fine. So before going to that, let me, yeah, okay, data engineering, right, okay. So here is, I'm just clearing the screen. Okay, is that my terminal window is visible to all of you? Is that font size seems okay? Because during the hands-on session, I'll be swapping with the terminal window and the program window and the presentation. So please let me know. Please feel free to unmute your mic, and if any of the concepts are not visible, so that at least I try to adjust my screen in such a way that it is visible. Okay, now I assume that the screen is visible and the fonts are visible as well. So I'm moving to the execution further. Now already we have seen the some of the, I mean, we have seen the same data samples which we are using, the data samples which we derived from the previous case, like submeter readings of 3 submeter readings against home appliances, over 4 years of data that gathered in the Paris. Now we are going to apply the regression. Before going to that, I would like to tell you the statistics about the data, so that I'm running a previous samples. See how the statistics are helpful on one case, and the other case, like how we are going to use this information for the regression sample. So if you take it here you could see especially our problem going to focus on the submeters. Okay, so our problem is like either to predict the submeter or you to predict the global active power that happens, so that given a given a data, whether is it possible to predict the other information or not. That's what we are trying to see. So here some of the statistics, like the maximum and the minimum submeter readings happen. So if you look at, and here we have different cases on submeter 3, where the submeter 1 and 2 almost have the values which are similar, where we could see submeter 3's standard deviation also different, and we could also see the mean values also different from the other submeters. So we found that all the data are not same. So there exists some component that significantly has a difference. Now let's take this exercise. We'll find out which component has a significant and how it is becoming a significant, and how far we can able to predict the information as close as possible. Okay, now this is some of the information about the data set. So coming to the our problem, what we are going to do is by passing a value of submeter 1, submeter 2 and submeter 3 reading, we are trying to predict the global active power. So that we assume that we don't have the information of global active power. So we are trying to predict the global active power given a submeter 1, submeter 2 and submeter 3 readings. So that's the case. I mean, I'm not sure, like with respect to the electrical engineering concept, how far it is going to make a sense. But with respect to the data science concept, we have some input, we have some output. We are trying to find the relationship between X and Y in terms of regression. As I told, global active power is in continuous domain. So hence, a regression problem is a good suitable problem against this. Okay. Now, I will walk through the code so that once I run the code, we will come to know how far the code is applying the machine learning concept to find the information in a better way. So the first thing is, like, we are trying to pull the data from the corpus. So the corpus name which I am having is household power consumption, and as I said, it is like a colon separated file. So here we are using some information to extract the data. So as for that information extraction, I am using the class pandas. I told in the beginning, like, pandas helpful for IO reading. Further, we are using data cleanup operation. In the data cleanup operation, we are using as I told, like, the data whichever we are having may not have a correct thing. So what we have is, like, we may have some missing values, and here in this case what I'm trying to do is the missing values are the values which are irrelevant. I am trying to fill with 0. So I assume that this value was not exist, so I am trying to fill with 0, but again it is your choice. Like, if you feel the data which is missing is irrelevant, you can drop the data. That is also one way of clean up the data. But instead of dropping out the data, I'm trying with zeros. So here comes the data cleanup part. So data engineering was over now. Now we will come to our actual data science. So in the data science, I am trying to create an array. As I said, the NumPy is more helpful for creating array. So the NumPy, I have used the alias. NumPy package. I can use it as NP so that it is a shorthand notation to access the methods that exist in the NumPy. So an NP dot array of, I am taking 3 columns, like submitter 1, submitter 2, and submitter 3. So that I'll have some assets sold 20 lakhs records are there. So 20 lakhs cross 3 dimensional array I will get. That array I call it as X. So in general, X is my input array. So what I am trying to predict is Y. Y is the another array that I am taking from the global active power. So global active power is the output, and submitter 1, 2, 3 is the input. So now what I am trying to do is I am trying to find the relationship between submitter 1 and the submitter 1, 2, 3 against the global active power. So X and Y. So typically I am trying to find the function F. I could say here the objective is we are trying to find the function F that has a relationship between X to Y. Okay, X to Y. So this is our actual task. Okay, now how do we do that? So as the function is, now we are trying with the linear regression. So that is the mapping function we are doing. But once we did that, we should also be able to know how far the relationship was established. For that, as I told, we need to split our data into training samples and the testing samples. So in our case, like I'm trying to reserve 70% of the data for training, so that the length will tell the total number of records that exist. Out of that, I'm using 0.7, which is 70%. That I call it as a training records, and X train has the training records and the Y train has corresponding output. So typically in my X train, I'll have 70% of the total records that has a submitter 1, submitter 2, submitter 3 readings, and the Y train will have 70% of the records from the space which has a global active power. Okay, so now what I going to do is, it's a very simple single line command. So I am trying to say the linear regression dot fit. Where does this linear regression comes from? This linear regression comes from the sample sklearn, scikit-learn. So scikit-learn has a built-in method to use. That's what I told, like scikit-learn or sklearn has a package of many machine learning approaches. So out of which I am using a linear regression as a method. And again, I also have mean square error, which is a matrix that is also defined in the scikit-learn. So what you need to do is you need to use this input and then you have to process it. So the fit method try to find the relationship between x and y. That's all. So linear regression dot fit, I try to pass the data x and try to pass the data y. That gives me a model. My model name is reg. I mean regression. So I mean in a shorthand notation I call it as a reg. So now the way in which the model learns, I mean the way in which the model finds the relationship is completely determined over the 70% of the data. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I have remaining 30% of the data that is helpful for testing. So here I'm going to use x test, y test, which is from the 70%, I mean remaining 70%. Other than 70%, here 0 to train 70 I'm using. So here from train 70 to other samples. So if you have exposure with the NumPy, you came to know how these notations are mentioned, and many times this Python will have similarity over the MATLAB. Okay, not all times, I mean many cases. So here I am using array indexing, so that actually you can assume that, not assume, I mean it is very clear. X test will have a 30% of data and Y test will have a 30% of data for global active power, and X test will have submeter 1, 2, 3. So what we are going to do is we have our regression model, and then with that regression model we are trying to pass our testing data to see how far the learning was happened. So 70% we allocated for the learning, and the outcome is the model, and that model we are going to use for testing to evaluate that how far the learning was happened, so that we come to know the accuracy of the learning process. So regression dot predict, and the predict I am passing the testing data. So if I pass the test input, then it will give me some outputs, right? So that I call it as a y predict. Okay, now or in our case we can say y dash. Okay, if I try to compare y dash with the y test which I am having, then I come to know what is the difference between the y predicted and the y test, or y dash and the y test. And then if I try to find the distance, then I come to know, okay, this much is the error that it was done during the learning process. Correct. So now this is the overall objective. So if I want to know the error, if I just try to display the error, it doesn't make a sense. Instead, what I'm doing is I try to plot those error. Okay. As I said, like we are using mean square error to find the difference between the predicted value and the actual value. If my predicted value is equal to the actual value, obviously the distance is 0. That means I will not have error. If my predicted values differ from the actual value, then I will have the mean square error value which is high. So I know that this is differ from the one which is actually getting. So that then I'll come to know how many number of samples the system is unable to perform. Now once executing this, we'll come to know many things happening during the learning process. Okay, so the final code, these 5 lines of code, it says that like I have used some plots, the scatter plots, to display those mean square error against the number of samples. For each sample, what is the error, so that we will come to know what is the actual learning. Okay, now I'll take console and then try to execute Python 05. It's regression.py, and please bear with me. It will take at least some seconds, more than 20 to 30 seconds for execution, because we are using almost 20 lakh samples, and with that 20 lakh samples, it takes a few seconds more. I mean more than 20 to 30 seconds, and then once it's executed, you'll come to know how much. Yeah, it's going. Correct. Okay. Now let me just zoom it. I mean, or expand it. Now you see this is the actual outcome of the linear regression in terms of prediction. So what does it mean is in the x-axis I have the samples or the global active powers actual value of y, and in the y-axis with respect to the actual value, what is the error? I mean the error in which our predicted model that does the error. So you see uh, actually it's almost close for if the global active power is 1, that means the model could be able to predict if the global active power was below 1, I mean between 0 to 1, so that the mean square error was very minimal. And going forward, you could see different trends that happen between 1 to 2, where the mean square error was going high. That means it is unable to predict very clearly for the global active power value between 1 to 2. So that we could be able to visualize because the mean square error is high. And for global active power between 2 to 3, again a different trend was followed, and 3 to 4 again different trend was followed, and 4 to 5 again different trend was followed. Especially when you see some cases where the mean square error was too high in the sense like for other cases, if you make a line, so where the mean square error is within 2.5, but here if you look at there was one few samples that go beyond the 2.5, where we have to see whether these samples are spurious samples, or sometimes we call it as whether these samples are outliers with respect to our scenario, and we have to investigate why these samples gives too much high. There could be multiple reasons. The samples, the data point may not be accurate for these samples. That could be the reason in which the model unable to these points are somewhat biased, so that the model unable to train over these points, and hence it becomes the mean square error becomes high. So there are various cases. Now you see we didn't done anything. Instead, with the help of submeters reading, we tried to find the global active power and then see the error values and how far this error value is distributed across global active power. So that this gives different insight. Let's say if we could be able to control the global active power, then the error value is very minimal between 0 to 1. So that for this region, the submeter readings are very good. Probably we have to check it out, like what could be the submeter readings for global active power between 0 to 1, and the other case. So this is how, like what we did was actually I'll recollect what we are trying to do or what we tried. So what we did was, our objective is to we tried to work on the linear regression sample, for which we have taken some data points from the submeter 1, submeter 2, submeter 3 readings, and this we call it as our input data points, and we try to predict the output y. For which what we did is 70% of the samples we allocated for training, and 30% of the samples we allocated for testing, and we allow our system to learn the relationship through 70% of the sample, and we test the system with the 30% of the sample. And with that 30% of the sample, we try to plot a dot plot or scatter plot in such a way that what is the error that is happening during the learning process, and then we will come to know the maximum error the linear regression could make is 17.5 for few or for cases, and on an average the error is between 0 to 2.5. Okay, so now this is one way where you can able to predict continuous data point in the through linear regression concepts. Now we will switch back to the presentation, and we worked out some linear regression concepts. Now let's come back to clustering. And simple problem. Instead of, I would like to go with different tasks so that at least you will have some exposure on how these problems are handled with respect to different tasks, and you will also have some enjoyment of leaving the class. Okay, we have some concept that we learn. Okay, next concept which we are going to discuss is clustering. As I said, the clustering is happening through unsupervised fashion. Now, how far the clustering can be applied over the sample space or the example which we are using right now? In our case, like here we are going to cluster the data points in such a way that let's say we have three submitters reading. I would like to classify the data usage with respect to three categories. Let's say the data usage is low, the data usage is average, and the data usage is high, so that we can go for some decision making process. But these three classes are like for a decision making purpose, maybe like how we will have a signals like green, yellow and red, so that with that we can go for different decisions. Same way here, what we need to know is, if I would like to make a decision towards that, let's say 90% of the total population is going for a heavy data, I mean heavy power usage, where maybe the power was run through a generator, then we may need a backup system so that the system, I mean, can be balanced through other way. Some sort of some sort of decision we want to do, but that decision we do not have in hand. We have only the data in hand. Then how to cluster this data into different units so that the decision can be taken? So that we are going to do with the k-means clustering algorithm. So how this k-means clustering is going to use is, as the name suggests, I mean, since I am going in a practical way, I'm not going to the algorithm and how it is going to work. Instead, how we can use that algorithm for the practical purpose, because the section itself are hands-on. I don't want to go much theory. So the name itself suggests that the k-means algorithm is going to use a k data, I mean k clusters, so that each cluster will have k centroids. If we know k clusters, and we will have k centroids, and the data points are associated towards the centroids, so that we come to know the data points and its centroids, and then based on that we can go for a decision making. Okay, so now typically how this k-means clustering algorithm happening is like at the first run or first iteration, what will happen is a random centroid will be selected, and then each time you predict, the centroid will be moving towards the data points density, and then finally for multiple runs, if there is no change in the k-means or the centroid's position, then we can fix that the clusters are converged so that there will not be any change. So this is the typical objective of k-means. So what we need to do is we should know the number of clusters. In our case, as we said, we would like to know 3 clusters, so that we will come to know which cluster is low, which cluster is medium, which cluster is high. When a new data point comes, we could be able to cluster, okay, whether this data point is coming from a medium or a low or a high cluster, so that we can go for a further decision making. That's the overall idea. Now we will go for the next workouts that we are having. Again, I'll open up the program so that how this clustering can be done through k-means clustering. Many steps are simple. Simple in the sense many steps are same in the previous sample. So here I am just loading the data. So again using pandas. Then I am using a cleanup process, so that all the question marks and the null values or NA values. Sometimes we say not a number, NA values. Those things are filled up with 0, so that it doesn't getting stopped during my computation. Further, here there is no y, because as I said, it is purely unsupervised learning. Here we will not have outcome. Instead, we have only the input. Okay, so here again I am taking submitter 1, submitter 2, and submitter 3, and I am trying to clusters into 3 different clusters. So I take the value X. In my previous case, the same. I have taken the value X, and then here just for confirmation, I'm just printing it to see that the number of array dimension. And further, any doubts? Any doubts, audience? Okay. If any doubt, please feel free to unmute your mic and stop me there, so that if further explanation required, I can go ahead and do that. And now what happens, like since the data points are too high, it will take a huge amount of time. Instead, I am saying the first 5,000 samples for this case, because the computation time is too high, and then I don't want to wait all the audience to wait for more than 10 minutes, something like that. So instead, what I'm doing is I'm reducing the sample space. Instead of taking 20 lakhs records, I'm just taking the 5,000 records for this clustering algorithm. So I take some amounts of records from the X, and I'm putting in sorry, no. What I'm doing is I'm using all the records, but instead of that, I use 5,000 records for testing to see that how far this clustering happened. So that's all. Okay. So now what I did is, like I used the value X, which is having the entire population, and entire population I'm giving to k-means. So see, like it's a simple method invocation k-means, and the number of cluster, of course, we would like to cluster into 3 clusters. So we are putting into 3, and then maybe once this algorithm is, once this particular line is executed, we will know the full k-means. Full k-means in the sense we will have a mapping between this and the what are the mapping in the sense what are the cluster centroids, so that if a new data point comes, we can predict it. Now you see, like you can also print the cluster centers using this, and further, as I said, I have taken some 5,000 samples reserved for testing. So what I try to do is I try to predict what is the actual cluster. What is the cluster in which the 5,000 samples fall in. So I use predict. Now what I want to do is I would like to make a plot in such a way that how this clustering happen, so that we can see some sort of classes or some sort of hierarchy over there. Okay, let me execute this Python 06 clustering.py. Our objective is we have 3 submitter readings, and we would like to cluster into 3 classes, so that in the future, if submitter reading comes, we come to know whether this particular reading may fall in which class. That's all. So that's our agenda, so that maybe further decision making can be done. So this is sort of doing analysis in an unsupervised way to see how far the data is distributed. Maybe I may take 3, maybe if required, maybe 5 or 7 or even 8. Depends upon the demand. We can go and do the clustering for decision making further. Okay, so here, yeah, right, yeah. Good. So now I just zoomed it for 5,000 samples, how these samples are clustered, and you see the y-axis that discuss about the cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, and the x-axis has the testing samples. For the testing samples, how it goes to cluster. Now I would like to show some of the interesting facts. Let me zoom only the cluster 3, so that okay. Okay, now you see the values that determines the clusters. Okay, 3 values which are comma separated typically. The first value is 37, which came from submitter 1, and 36 from the submitter 2, and the 17 from the submitter 3. Okay, so if I have combination of something like this, then I could say it belongs to cluster 3. And here also not similar trend. Again, the submitter 1 has a value 37 and the submitter 2 has a value 1 and the submitter 3 has a value 17. So somewhat something similar trend I could able to see for cluster 3. Come back. Let me come back, and then if you see cluster 2, yeah, let me zoom in. If you take cluster 2, the submitter 3 values are not 17. Instead, it has value 9, and the submitter 1 and 2 are 0. That's some other that fall into cluster 2, and some other cases also we could able to see, like 3, 4, and the other cases, and remaining cases are fall into cluster 1. Okay, so this is one way of organizing the data into different clusters for different decision making through unsupervised learning. And even you can go further and increasing the number of clusters and then see how which submitters contribute significant towards the clustering decision. That is also another good task you can carry out further, where since it's introductory, I would like to introduce how this can be handled on a different perspective. So that's our objective. Now coming to the important aspect, where again coming back to the presentation, the further learning is ensemble learning, where many cases you may not I'm not sure like how this ensemble learning was given focus nowadays, but I would like to emphasize the ensemble learning. If you take ensemble learning, this is quite different from the other learning. Here the ensemble means, it's, let's say in the previous case we have only one learner in the sense, like we have only one hypothesis. That hypothesis defines the decision. In our clustering case, we have only one k-means clustering algorithm that decides whether this particular point belongs to cluster 1, 2, or 3. And the previous case, we have a simple linear regression equation y equal to mx plus c. That is our hypothesis. That hypothesis decides or predicts the results. Now, always one single hypothesis will not make excellent if you have a large amount of data which are having multiple attributes, in the sense different characteristics of the data. So in our case, we have taken only submitters. If we include global active power, if we include global reactive power, and if we include other cases, like different attributes are there. Now, if different attributes may take a different decision on different hypotheses. So now that is also come to play. So the underlying point is, one hypothesis may not make good sense over the data. Instead, I need a multiple hypothesis so that each hypothesis can make a decision at a particular for a set of data points. You could say set of data points. In that case, like one single hypothesis may not have best result. Let's say for a practical example, or for understanding purpose, let's say we have 1000 records and I have some 3 hypotheses. For a 500 records, hypothesis 1 gives me better results. For a 200 records, hypothesis 2 give me better results. For a remaining 300 records, hypothesis 3 give me better results. Now, if you take any hypothesis, none of the hypothesis is going to give me best results. But if I take all the hypotheses is going to join together and give me a better result. So now this kind of learning will happen in the reality, where instead of using one hypothesis to predict, or one single concept to predict, I will club multiple concepts, and then I'll try to select the best one which is having a best possible outcome. So this kind of concept is called boosting and ensemble learning. So in typical, we will use different models, or sometimes we will call as ensemble learning. Is the process by which I have a multiple models, and different models may have different solutions to a particular problem. Instead of using one simple model, I'm going to use multiple model. So using the boosting concept, I try to boost the weak learners to a weak learner, in the sense the weak hypothesis, so that I'll club all the weak hypothesis into one strong hypothesis. So a classical example for this is AdaBoost classifier, where AdaBoost tried to find weak hypothesis, multiple weak hypotheses for a particular case, and then out of those weak hypothesis, it finds the best hypothesis out of it. Okay. So right, this nowadays you could see some, you might have heard SGD, stochastic gradient descent boosting, where these concepts are developed from the AdaBoost. AdaBoost is the basics for all these things. And if you find some time, you go with you go and learn with the AdaBoost. I'll say what is that AdaBoost. So typically what it does is AdaBoost try to find some weak learner in the sense this particular hypothesis, or the learner we call it as a hypothesis. This particular hypothesis good for few samples. Remaining other samples, that hypothesis will not work. And I have some other hypothesis that is good for some other samples which may not work for the previous samples. So something like that. This learning is not unified across all the samples. Instead, the learning is good only for a few amount of samples. So those learner we call it as a weak learner, and we try to group all the weak learner to make a strong learner. In simple case, let's say we are gathering in our class all the weak learners, all the weak students into one single place, and then try to find the best weak learner out of it, so that he can get a pass mark in the exam. So that we can train in such a way that they can get the pass mark. So some sort of concept. So in general, you can see like how let's say I have input space X. This input space X will have n number of learners. Okay, we call it as ensemble regressors or ensemble learners, and during the execution or during the prediction, from the n learners we are trying to pick up the one that gives the best output for it, so that for the particular sample that learner gives the best output, we are taking that as a outcome. So this kind of learning is comes from the AdaBoost concept, or a group learning, or a ensemble learning we call. Okay, now we will see how this AdaBoost is going to work out. What we are going to do is we are going to revisit the problem which we have seen in the previous case, like linear regression, where linear regression you see there are a lot of error was there. How we can overcome those error through AdaBoost. So that's what we are going to see, so that we will come to know, we learn some new concepts. So here nothing like nothing new, simple. All these things are came from the same package AdaBoost. Same package sklearn, which has AdaBoost regression. So we are going to use AdaBoost regression learner. That means it is good. We are using AdaBoost concept for linear regression. So what typically going to happen is, instead of using one simple linear regression, we are going to use multiple linear regression to find the best relationship, so that for each data point which linear regression gives the best relationship, that regression will be considered. And the outcome is we are trying to reduce the error in such a way that the AdaBoost, the joint learning will. Hello? Yeah. Anything? Any doubts? Okay, so the joint learning going to improve the performance. Yeah, I think this is the last sample, last hands-on thing I would like to show you, so that at least I can also wind up the session on time. Though we started late, my objective is I don't want to hold the audience for longer. Okay. So here we have seen many points that happens, like I'm loading the submitters reading in the X and the Y. So as we know, it is a regression. So we are trying to predict the Y value. Instead of using a linear regression, what we are going to use is we are going to use the AdaBoost regression. So AdaBoost regression going to work on the decision tree based learning process, in which the number of levels for decision can be 3 levels. Okay, so this I am fixing for number of levels in which decision tree learning can be go for 3 levels, so that within the 3 level the decision can be decision must be done, and the number of estimators. That means I ask the system, you go for 300 estimators. That means 300 you can let's say I could say the linear regression in which you can use this 300 different linear regression to make the judgment so that the judgment should be better. So that's all. Okay, so instead of one single regression, I'm going to use multiple linear regression for AdaBoost learning to get the better results. And once that is done, so we will have a model. Model is our AdaBoost regression model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to predict the results. As I said, 30% of the data is reserved for testing. So we are trying to predict the results, and then again we are trying to make a plot to see how far the results are predicted. So that's it. Okay, now we will try to execute and then see how it is going to do that. Okay, so Python 07 AdaBoost. So I mean, it will again, since for single learner itself, it takes time. So maybe it will take at least a minute of time. Meanwhile, let me give you some few more inputs. So if you take, I mean, if you think on the other side, like um, the machine learning, so until otherwise, if you don't involve any programming stuff, then the machine learning you have to rely on the toolbox that is available in the machine learning, again for which you have to rely on the cloud, which I don't want to confuse. Instead, if you start to use simple, if you start to understand simple machine learning concept, I think most of you will have had a good exposure in the MATLAB. So similar tools are available in the MATLAB. As I am comfortable with the Python, I'm just giving an experiment over the Python, and even Python is not so difficult to learn. So anybody could learn the Python and then does the job. So what I suggest is, like, if you start to learn this concept either through any programming language, I don't want to confine yourself to Python. Instead, any programming language, if you start to learn, start to build yourself on simple machine learning concept, definitely over a period of time you will also become an expert. Then you can use those concepts in your domain. Let's wait for the results, because it will take some time. Meanwhile, we'll go through the remaining I mean presentations, I think. Yeah. Okay. So what we learned is, like, we learned the different machine learning scenarios. We learned, okay, yeah, the results came. Okay, let me zoom that. Yeah. Now, earlier you see, like, the few points, like the outliers I would like to highlight. Earlier you see it was more than 17.5 for the outliers. Now it has been brought down to almost below 16. That's one case where the ensemble learnings plays a vital role. I mean, vital role, even the outliers. Now the best case is, like, you see, earlier we see 2.5 as the mean square error for many data points, and here almost the mean square error has been brought below 2 or 2, let's say 2, and for many data samples. Okay, so what does it mean? It is like, if you take multiple weak learners to group into one single strong learner, then the outcome is better than one single strong learner, because this data is not unique. Since that the distribution of the data is sampled from different space, so I need different I mean different learners to learn the relationship between the data and the outcome, so that different learner work on different data samples to find a better one. So that's the agenda. I mean, that's the overall idea I would like to explain for with respect to machine learning. Now, all those things gives different insights about the predicted outcomes, and then how that outcome is valuable. Okay, let me close it, and then yeah. So we seen three different approaches. One is regression, how regression can be applied, and the second thing is clustering, how clustering can be useful for ML task in unsupervised fashion, and then how advanced the regression, like AdaBoost, can be deployed for better solution. And let's say I have some request from the previous session about the MATLAB uses. Since this session was predominantly focus on Python. If you want to use MATLAB, here is your toolbox. You can use the same toolbox for the same problems like statistics and machine learning toolbox. And here you have deep learning toolbox for deep learning cases. And yeah, I have, though I have tried to cover the session by 3:30, but 2 minutes I have overshoot. I mean, anyway, so I may share you this presentation and all those things. You may get it from the organizer as well. So with that, I am closing the session. So I think we start with the machine learning basics, and I brought you to the machine learning algorithms, some algorithms with the hands-on. I think the session is useful, I guess. So I'd like to hear, I mean, any questions from the audience. Now, let me open the floor for questions. Any questions? Maybe suggestions like you feel that the session is very heavy. Okay. Anything happen in the chat window? Okay. Right. I didn't find anything. Yeah, Hari, if no questions, is there any questions?
Yes, sir. Still now we have not received any questions.
Yeah, correct. I also see the chat window. Okay,
Yes, sir.
if there is no questions, then maybe I can stop sharing the presentation.
Yes, sir. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So thanks for your time. I hope I have done some valuable inputs. Maybe it may not be I mean relevant now, but you may feel relevant when you are dealing with the machine learning. So that's what I can guarantee you. So now it could be a fuzzy words, but later it will be a very useful one. Okay.
Definitely, sir. Thank you, sir. You have elaborated all the details regarding the machine learning and deep learning, which is related to this electrical engineering domain. That has been a tremendous presentation, and it has been coming to an end successfully after this afternoon, because you are the only person who was inaugurated on the first day, and you are completing it on the fourth day. So we are really grateful and thankful to you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the audience as well. Yeah,
So
thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Participants, the feedback link will be shared soon. You can just check with the chat box.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll leave the channel now.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.